Hello again. It's with sadness I inform you of the passing of John White, a friend of mine and maybe yours too for the last few years through the Doctor Who community. And he just turned 52 years of age. John had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in late 2022 and given just a few months to live back then. As a writer, he immediately began talking about his illness and the path of his life to that point. He and I had spoken before on other topics, but we weren't close friends, more acquaintances. So I was humbled when he expressly requested me to interview him, with the aim of putting together what he wished to stand as his testimony, titled Why My Preventable Death Failed to Be Prevented. As one can imagine, I found this challenging. Like many people, I'm uncomfortable speaking of and even considering mortality. Then there's the fact time was immediately precious to John. I didn't want to waste it for him. We got to know each other that afternoon in early 2023 when recording took place, and remained in contact throughout the rest of his life. John fought bravely, like a lion in fact, taking experimental treatments and enduring the odd spell of time in hospital. He spent his remaining months writing, building and painting models and reading, as well as welcoming the birth of his first grandchild in March of 2024. I can hardly imagine how that must have felt. He was so very, very proud and very thankful that he'd lived long enough to meet her. John further requested that his testimony again be shared in the eventuality of his death. Again, I will admit this doesn't make for the easiest of listening or viewing. Still, John was an entertaining interviewee, a very sweet man who enjoyed life and meant well. Means well. So here is our conversation, again in full from January 2023. I think you'll find it more life-affirming than it sounds, and there are links in the video description here so one can read further or reach out to those charities related to pancreatic cancer that John wished to draw your attention to. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's own King of the Geeks, and this is going to be a conversation unlike any other that I've certainly had publicly before with someone that I know through the Doctor Who community. I'm here with the writer, John White, to talk about something that's very, very real world. And despite the fact that you're very well spoken and entertaining, John, this isn't the kind of chat that anybody really wants to have, is it?
Well, I'm dealing with a situation that absolutely nobody wants to be in, for a start. And the reason we're having this conversation today is that I am terminally ill. And on December the 13th, I was told that I have between 3 to 6 months to live. Because very late it's been discovered that I have late stage pancreatic cancer. So that's been quite a lot to deal with. But I've always been somebody who's spoken up and told my truth, and I'm still able to speak up and tell my truth, although I'm dealing with increasing difficulties on the day. Because I am getting into the cancer pain, and it isn't necessarily fun. But we deal with what's in front of us. But the reason that I asked you to interview me is because I want to tell everybody my testimony of how I got into this position where I suddenly discovered that I'm, close to dying so late. And in order to do that, I've got to tell my personal story. So that's what I would like to do, and then for me and you to discuss all of the issues about pancreatic cancer and why it's being discovered so late for thousands of people, and why it's proving to be such a lethal killer. Because I've certainly learned things that I wish I knew back when it could have done me some real good. One of them is not to be lulled into a false sense of complacency about my own health, both by interaction with doctors and with websites. However, having said that, there's things that I'm not going to do. And that, number one, is no names, no pack drill. I'm not going to be naming specific doctors. I'm not looking to draw attention or crowd or anything to have a go at specific people. The problems of the NHS are certainly systemic, but what I will say is that everything about this, how my preventable death failed to be prevented, took place under Herefordshire NHS, and either involved my time living in Hereford City or in another Herefordshire town. But that's as far as the details will go. So I think it's reasonable to name the NHS trust I've been living under, but then the problems here are certainly not unique to this NHS trust. So that's the kind of what I'm looking to do, because I do want to try to ensure that some lessons get learned by someone somehow. And if that means the chance to educate some of my online friends before I go, too damn right. Let's do it. And equally, I'm looking to get my story looked at. I'm meeting my MP very soon, for example, and making sure that there's some sort of official wheels that turn. Having said that, I'm dying. And I have insights to share about dying. I've lived a lot around death, actually, because I've been a care worker myself for over 10 years. So I've seen more than my share of dead bodies, and I've nursed more than a few people through the dying process, including people of dying of cancers very similar or the same as the one that I'm going to die of. What I can tell you, which is quite good news, is that I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of either the death, because this was never going to last forever, and I don't believe in holding on to resentments and grudges and oh dears and why me's. So at the end of it,
that's something though, John, that I think when you get into middle age, that's something that really starts to hit home to a person.
It does.
Anyway,
yeah,
isn't it?
It does. Well, you kind of go, well, if the worst goes, I'll have to make the best of it. Obviously, it's always so much harder when someone dies young, and when a child dies, it's the worst. So if there's a question of treating a sick child or treating me, I'd say treat the sick child first, always. Always.
You mentioned a few minutes. You mentioned a few moments ago, John, that you were diagnosed just over a month ago.
Under a month, the 13th of December. So I've had less than a month. Let's start the whole thing off. So look,
I've got a question for you.
Yeah,
I've got a question for you, first of all, John, because you're right about complacency. I think particularly amongst men, myself included, is that we kind of take our health for granted. We take it as read that we're going to be fit as a fiddle until whatever, and as long as we feel generally okay, we tend not only to not go to the doctors, but more often than not to complain. I think that
that's very true.
we joke about man flu. It's okay
like
to joke about things like man flu, and that's all very very funny. And I think that's true. I think that men can sometimes vocalize that, but I think when we've got an ache or a pain, a niggle or something, we tend to just hope it'll pass and not talk about it. That kind of thing. There's a difference, isn't there, between that and a bit of man flu?
It's a very well acknowledged fact, but men do better with somebody watching their back than they do on their own. In terms of having a partner, having a relationship, it has a very real impact on male life expectancy. 5 to 10 years for somebody who's lived alone as opposed to somebody who's lived in a relationship. Precisely because partners watch each other backs more and go, no, you're not ignoring that. Get down the blimmin' doctor. That kind of thing. But partners do for each other. But sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself. And that's part of what I was fighting all the way through this, because before I can talk about my cancer, I need to talk about my mental health, because my mental health is part of why my cancer was missed. So let me explain. Actually, I don't know if you've got it, Dan, but I sent you a picture of what I said was me in my prime. So if you've got it handy, could you pop that up? Because I'd like people to see who I'm talking about. This is the me I used to be, so to speak. There I am.
So how long ago was this as of recording?
This is me. This would be early 2016. So this was shortly before I became ill. And at this point in my life, I'm strong, I'm happy, I'm healthy. I'm doing 4 or 5 12-hour shifts a week. And
it's intense, John.
And I'm a senior carer who's been to university, got a health and social care degree, and I'm just doing an NVQ filler course in management, and then I'll be applying for care home manager jobs. Because I've worked really hard, educationally for the last 2 years at this point, frankly, so I could spend more time at a desk and less time wiping arses. Because when you work in the care industry, there's a great deal of wiping arses, but the wiping arses also brings back strain and other problems. So looking to
just like any other profession, you were working your way
the rest
up.
of my working life, thinking, I've got 20 years till I retire, care home manager or care home deputy manager to start with. Everything was going really well in my life. And I worked so hard to get to that point. But I was working as a troubleshooter, if you like, because there's a lot of care homes that get into trouble with the commission, the Quality Commission, and they rated
legal trappings and obligations and that duty of care.
So they get assessed and they get scored, and if they're underperforming, they have to make improvements, and if they fail to make improvements, they could be shut down. So that's the job of a CQC. So especially in the last year or so, I'd really been specializing in troubleshooting more than anything else, because I was working for an agency that was paying me very nicely, thank you, to go into these homes which were really suffering and damn well implement some standards. So I was Mr. Stickler. I was Mr.
So very a responsible position. A lot of people would have been.
Very much so. I'd worked for 10 years to reach that level of both responsibility and remuneration. I mean, I wouldn't say I was earning as much as a nurse. That's different. But for the position I was in my career, I was doing very well. I was doing very well indeed. And I had no problems funding my lifestyle like I wanted to on the wages that I was earning and things. So things were good. But what happened was, this home was in such trouble that the police were very likely to be getting involved in it.
The police?
Yes, because if care workers neglect or abuse staff, they will face charges and they will face prison. So, in the more severe cases where the CQC's gone in and found criminal acts, you bet the police are involved. So I was working at this place. Everything seemed to be going fine to me, but one of the people who was in real trouble decided to dropped me in the same trouble because they didn't like me. So
a clash of personalities, conflict of
they
interests.
they had good reason to hate me because I knew everything that they were doing wrong.
I see.
I'm the one who's been to university. I know it backwards. I know the laws backwards. You know, I mean, I'm pretty damn good.
You made an enemy, John.
I did. And as a result, they told a completely cock and bull story. But I was suddenly my work dried up, which wasn't unusual. Work knocked off suddenly for a few days and then picked up again. It wasn't, you weren't guaranteed hours per se. It was, 0-hour contract because it was care, but it didn't used to bother me because I used to get all the work I wanted. And if I had a slack week, I'd just, do a couple of fun days or something. So
yeah.
But then my work wasn't picking up again, and then I was trying to find out what was going on. And the office was like, I didn't have anything. Oh bloody hell! So I rang up the next county over and said, "Have you got work for me?" And at first they said, "Oh yeah, great, John, come over." Ah, there you are, sorted. I'll just do a bit of work for them, and come back up and work in Worcestershire, in a couple of weeks. Later on that day, we rang back. Sorry, John, we can't give you those shifts. And that was it. Very cool. And about an hour after that, I then got a call telling me I was under investigation for an abusing a client. But that was it. No support. I wasn't called into the office. No linking to the Samaritans or anything. Because actually, when care workers get accused of abuse, the suicide rate is pretty significant. Because a lot of innocent people can't stand being accused of doing something terrible. So there is a significant problem, and you're supposed to
slur somebody's name because
the
truth of the matter is, John, that mud does stick, doesn't it? And to slur somebody's name, is a very serious thing.
And when a complaint is made, it can't just be ignored. So that part is right, but it handled very badly. And because I was told on the telephone, and the shock was so absolute, I had a stroke there and then on the phone.
Oh, I see.
And I was stood in that room for an hour, just stood there, unable to even think about sitting down, with my mind just breaking around me. Because you think about how many people you might meet working in the care sector over the course of a week or a month or whatever. And then you're told that you're supposed to have done something to one of them, but you're not told which one, and you're not told what you're supposed to do. I mean, your mind just got nowhere to go. And the shock for me was terrible. It absolutely wrecked my life. It caused me to have a grand mal psychotic collapse. And I was completely incapacitated for about 4 months until the medication helped me to come back out of it. It was terrible. I had to be nursed by my sister for the next, until the end of the summer in 2016. And that was the position I was left in then. I mean, of course, I was completely cleared. I was absolutely vindicated. It was revealed to all be bullshit. There was no evidence. There was no truth to it. I have an absolutely unblemished record, and I still have an active DBS to this day.
But you had to go through hell and back to get through the other side of that.
I did, but more importantly, the thing is, that means that I could ring up a care home and get a job in a care home today. I'm so well qualified, anybody would employ me. But what I discovered was when I started to try to go back to work, that's why I discovered the damage that had been done to me in terms of anxiety and inability to trust my co-workers anymore. And also, just basically an underlying fear of something so traumatic happening again. So it was just impossible.
Well, this is the question that we always ask,
isn't it? It was a nightmare.
How easily could something like that happen again? That's bound to be your first question.
Once you've been through something like that, you don't casually risk a second occurrence. No, you don't. At least you shouldn't if you've got any sense. So I had to go and do something else. My career was over. I had to abandon everything that I put into it. I simply couldn't continue in the field.
How about your health? Obviously, to have it sounds like you had there's no such thing as a not serious stroke, but to have a stroke
Yeah, it left me
instantaneously
with
like
real
that.
brain damage. It left me with real brain damage. So, I actually do have cognitive damage. I have cognitive impairment. I am mentally disabled as a result of all this. And in the 6 years since, my situation has degenerated rather than improved per se. And I've been absolutely plagued with panic attacks and anxiety disorder.
So we're
Which
talking
are
about a
crippling.
holistic
Yeah,
view
yeah,
at your own, at where your mental health and
yeah,
your
yeah,
physical health
yeah.
would cross over.
I've come back from a wreckage. I really have. So the last 6 years of my life, nothing has been easy. And then what happened was there was a circumstance which meant I had to leave where I was living. I was looking after my mum's house after she died, and I couldn't stay for any longer. It had to be sold. So I moved to a place in Hereford in February 2020. So I moved from Worcestershire to Hereford, which I was a bit reluctant about because everything was set up with all my support team in Worcestershire, but I
With
just
people
couldn't
that you
find
trusted and a system that was working for you
doctors
and
who knew
helping you
me,
through all
and
that.
yeah, so I was in a good position there, but I just couldn't find anywhere to live in that area because Worcestershire's got a little bit expensive these days, and Herefordshire was
Yeah.
cheaper, right? And then I had to go there because that's where somewhere to live was. I didn't really have a choice, because my budget was limited on where I could live because, of course, I've not been able to work. Um, and I should point out that I mentioned that I had to stop working because then I picked myself up and I went to university in 2017, and I went back. I went back to university, fresh degree, screenwriting, creative writing, and screenwriting, which
Had that been a long-held ambition of yours, John?
something I should have done when I was 18, when I could have done it for free. Frankly,
Spoken like the pragmatist that I know you
I'm
to be.
an absolute idiot that I was when I was 18. But no, I mean, it was something that I certainly wasn't going. I wasn't going to tolerate not doing it any longer. Because I'd gone to university 4 years before purely for career money reasons.
Professional, yeah.
Nothing to do with my personal enrichment of my philosophy or all of that sort of stuff. So I'll go again and go for what I want this time. That's the whole point, Dan, was to go for what I want. But it was a great success. So by the time it was into 2020, I'm very experienced as a writer. Articles, scripts, books.
So
Comic strips, TV
where may
all.
people have read your work?
Well, unfortunately, in terms of my creative work, it never really got much chance to get going because I started to feel so ill from the start of 2020 that I just couldn't do much creatively. But I did persevere with articles for a good while because they're like
Yeah.
my backstop is articles. But no, I'm afraid that my grand fictions will remain untold. Unfortunately, that's a shame because I was hoping to tell them. But hey, such is fate. So anyway, I'm now in Hereford, and it's the start of 2020, and I've not been there long, and I start to get woken up in the middle of the night by back pain. I'm going to bed absolutely fine, just get to bed, nice and all cozy, nice and sleepy, lovely,
Yeah.
lovely, and I'm waking up like, oh bloody hell! So yeah, I've got
John,
some.
it's fair to say that by the time you get to our age, we're used to being up in the middle of the night anyway, at least
Yeah,
once,
but
aren't we?
but a,
But
but a
it's
pain
different.
strong enough to wake you up is unusual. Maybe having trouble getting to sleep because you're in pain is not unusual because of muscles and everything ache and joints ache and stuff as we get older. So that's a bit more normal. But to go to sleep normally and then wake up in pain, that was unusual. At least to me it was. So, and also my stomach had started to hurt across the bottom all the bloody time. So that was the start of me going to the doctor.
Was this every night or just most nights? Or
No,
did it gradually increase?
well, all of the symptoms up and down. You don't get all of them at full strength all the time. So back pain comes, back pain goes, stomach pain goes, there comes, stomach pain goes, but there's
Yeah.
always something. There's always something not right. And of course, I was having a lot of stomach pain because my whole digestive system was fouling up and starting to slow up, and everything was getting difficult and painful. I mean, through most of 2020, really, up until the summer of 2022, I think, I was just struggling with that stomach pain so bloody much. So I first started to go to the doctor. Okay, we'll keep an eye on it, sort of thing. And they gave me some codeine for the back pain, I remember. And then, of course, 2020, so COVID. So most of the times I spoke to a doctor in 2020 or 2021 was over a telephone.
Obviously, because the country went into lockdown, didn't it, in mid-March, around mid-March time?
I saw a doctor early 2020. I saw a doctor mid-2020. I saw a doctor mid-2021, and I saw a doctor early 2022. That doesn't mean that's the only times I rang up the doctors. I was trying to get help with my problems all through.
With these persistent aggravations and symptoms.
Just to get seen was a struggle.
Mm.
You really had to push just to get seen.
Were you able to phone was it your GP you would phone, or was it 911? Or
no, always my GP. Because I was living in Hereford, so if I wanted to go, what's the point? I could go if I needed to. I could just go get a taxi down A&E if I needed to go A&E.
I've got my numbers mixed up, haven't I? I'm thinking of 111. That's the.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's
911.
Basically what 111 would do. Would recommend that you get to A&E. If they felt that.
Because that would be the first thing that I would do, phone 111, because it's what people tell you. Have you phoned 111? Everybody says that. It's like it's the equivalent of an IT thing if you turned it off and on again. Everybody always asks, have you phoned 111?
Well, a lot of his government adverts pass me by because I don't consume the television, which is where a lot of them get on the advertising trails, don't they? But I never get exposed to that because I don't watch anything with adverts. But I know exactly what you mean. That is the messaging which is put out. 111 is the number to call instead of 999, unless you're really sure that your house is on fire. Something like that. But this was the problem I was having. I did manage to get a physical inspection in the summer of 2020. I don't think that there would have been anything there that could have been detected by touch anyway. But that didn't lead to me being sent on for a scan. So it was a sort of feel around my tummy and a finger up the bum and stuff. The sort of standard sort of testing that you do when you go and see a doctor with those sort of complaints. But I certainly think if I had been sent for a scan, then that could have been a major point which could have saved my life. So, and then it was like that. The same story for the next year. It took me a year to once again be invited to actually see a doctor.
So let's backtrack just a little. So you went for this physical examination, and you were given not a clear bill of health as such, but there was certainly no cause for alarm.
Well, actually, there was one thing which did stand out, which was my blood sugar came back high off my blood results. And this is something which actually caused something of a red herring. Because what happens is the amount of blood sugar in your system, depending on how efficient your body is at releasing enough insulin into your system to soak it all up. And insulin is produced by the pancreas. So you've got two types of diabetes. You've got one where insulin is not being produced. That's type 1, which you inject for. And you've got another, which is type 2, where the insulin is not being absorbed, and that you take the pill for. So that's two different types of diabetes. But when you've got pancreas cancer, you look like you've got diabetes because my pancreas function is impaired. It's not producing enough insulin to soak up my blood sugar.
Now, if out there anybody who's watching this is as ignorant as I am, my first question would be, where is your pancreas? Because I don't really know.
Well, there we go. Very lovely diagram. It sits underneath your stomach. And it actually, it looks like another piece of anatomy, really, doesn't it? That's the shape of the thing.
Your big toe. Yeah, it
And
does. Yeah.
it has two functions. It, as mentioned before, it releases insulin into your bloodstream to help you manage blood sugar levels. And it
I see.
releases hormones, it releases enzymes into your stomach to help digest food.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
later on, I've started to get a lot of trouble with my stomach being so painful and so much trouble trying to digest food, and food just goes through my system so slowly, and I'm just eating being associated with real discomfort to a point where I would say I haven't eaten a proper meal, a proper plate of food in one sitting since summer 2021.
So you experienced this.
I've been unable to eat a normal plate of food in one sitting since the summer of 2021.
And has this happened? Was this a sudden thing that happened to you in that summer?
As the cancer developed, it started to push in and restrict my available area in my stomach, you see. Yeah. And then I got to the point where when I was trying to eat a full meal, I would bring it back up because the food wasn't being digested. The enzymes weren't there to digest the food. So it was stuck in the stomach. It wasn't digested. It couldn't pass through. It's only got one direction to go, back out.
It was rejected by your system.
Exactly. So now I understand so much more about all these strange symptoms I was going through. But to backtrack also, I mean, we talked about the blood sugar. At first, we thought I was diabetic. So the high blood sugar level actually distracted away from what was more likely what was going on, and what we now know is irrefutably the real cause, meaning my pancreas was getting increasingly knackered. So we've got to that bit, but the other side of this is my mental health, because when you suffer from panic and anxiety, you're constantly trying to get your reason to overrule your unreason. You know, because panic and anxiety are not rational and not reasonable. You know, so if you try and get to the rational cause for it, there isn't one. You just damn well can't do that at the moment. You know, it could be go to the shop, you know, drive your car, you know, things that you just do thousands of times without thinking about them suddenly become like an impenetrable wall that you just can't make yourself go through. And the only thing you can do is retreat until the anxiety diminishes and you have another go when your anxiety's gone away. You know, so it's paralyzing, crippling.
To choose your battles very carefully.
Yes, but it
and
also
about the energy that you spend
in when you've got health problems and you've got a mind that, if you don't keep a grip on it, has a tendency to fall into panic. It's like trying to know, am I just panicking about this? In other words, is this something that I'm overreacting to and it's all in my head? And of course, that question was also being asked by my doctors.
Are you catastrophizing? Are you your own worst enemy?
Exactly. And of course, I didn't know the answer to that question, because how could I know? That's the whole problem when
that's why you've got to the doctor.
Your consciousness is trying to keep control of a subconscious, which will run out of control if you lose your grip on it. It creates a lot of issues, knowing what you should take seriously and what you should not worry about. And I mean, in the full analysis of this, the fact is that for over 2.5 years, my preventable cancer was missed. Some of that is undoubtedly, you know, has to look at what happened with the NHS, but I've also got to look at what happened with me, you know, because what was it that made it so that I could only, every time I got rejected by the doctor, every time I felt that I wasn't being taken seriously enough, I then had to build myself back up to have another go.
Yeah. Psych yourself back up.
After the second physical exam in the summer of 2021, that doctor basically said to me, well, you know, it's probably just constipation. Given in mind that I've been having terrible pain for over 1.25 years at that point, it was quite a thing to say.
Yeah.
Because
Now,
in all the phone calls, they're like, oh, try a bit of laxative, try a bit of this, try a bit of that. I'd had different prescriptions for this and that, over that time. It was just the difficulty of actually getting physically seen, But
I know that you're not, obviously we don't know each other that well, John, but we've spoken. You've been on broadcasts with me before. We know of one another. We've interacted. The man that I know you to be, you're not a vindictive man. You're
oh,
not,
not at all,
certainly not
not at all.
an aggressive man. And I know that that's not what this video is about. But I just want
Although
to restate.
that is true. Although I've also encountered attitudes which have been so awful that they do have to be called out. But I'm not doing that because I hate that person or have a grudge against them or want them to be hurt or anything like that. It's just I need to tell the truth of what happened. And, certain doctors' consultations were far from ideal, especially the ones I had more recently this year after I moved to a small Hereford town in the summer of 2022.
So
Which
you
is
moved
so
to
many ways.
you moved to
Yes, I
a
moved from
smaller
the city.
place.
I moved from the city to a small Hereford town, still in the county, but quite a distance away from Hereford city, with its own medical practice.
Were you
And
referred to another set of new people and new resources, or
well,
was
of
it
course,
diminished
I've
resources?
changed my postcode. So I should explain that how Hereford City works is quite unique in Hereford City, you don't even have your own doctor's surgery, let alone your own doctor. What you have is Hereford Medical Group. So if you ring up the HMG number in the morning and say, I need to see a doctor, they will allocate you to one of the surgeries and you'll get one of the doctors.
I
But you
see.
don't know who you're going to talk to, and maintaining
No, I've
relationships
never
with a
heard of this
specific
before.
doctor very hard because you don't have a doctor, you don't have a surgery, you have a
There's no
collective.
consistency.
Yeah. Whereas when I moved out to the small local town, that was different. That was then a much more sort of ordinary ring up the surgery, see the doctor at the surgery kind of situation because it wasn't this surgery sharing which goes on in Hereford City itself. And I'd have to say, that anything that makes it harder for you to develop a relationship with your doctor where a single doctor can see the progress of your condition over time, it's got to be damaging to your overall health provision. Because every time you see a locum who've never come across you before, and all they can do is quickly scan your notes, and they just don't know you as well as a doctor would if they'd seen you 3 or 4 times already for the same problem.
That's just common sense, isn't it?
It is, but it's.
I just want to stop you there just for a moment, John, to remind the people out there that, obviously we are here, aren't we? This is the 21st century, John, and it's an age full of streaming platforms.
Yes.
And YouTube is the very, very largest, and it's here to entertain, but it can also inform, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here with this conversation now. And on YouTube, obviously, you're used to hearing people like us, gobshites like me, constantly saying, please like, subscribe, and share, and all of that. But this time, by far, the most important component part of that is the share. So we want people to share this video, don't we?
I want you to share this video, especially if you're hearing this 2 months, 3 months, 4 months down the line, because by that point, the odds are increasing that I will no longer be able to speak. I will no longer be able to tell what's happened to me. And I'm doing it now because I can do it now. But this isn't a normal situation, this isn't where I'm going to go off on some health campaign for the next 2 or 3 years and try and get the law changed. And I'm not going to be able to do any of those things. All I can do is leave my story behind for others to take forward. So absolutely, we're talking about the value of sharing a video. Well, I mean, everybody wants to share their videos. Of course they do. I mean, it's the whole how YouTube works. But on this occasion, you can know if you share this video, you are helping to tell the story of a man who very shortly You'll no longer be able to tell this story at all. So if that gives you a good reason to do it for that reason. All over the network. Look at that.
Because there may be people, there could be somebody watching or listening to this who's experiencing some of the symptoms that you're about to talk about.
Absolutely.
Could be, maybe you were talking earlier on about family members. Somebody's spouse could be displaying some of these symptoms, and you may be worried about them. Here, you could get some. We don't want to frighten people.
It's important to say that pretty much all of the symptoms of pancreas cancer, or other cancers for that matter, you can get from other conditions. So having 1 or 2 or 3 of these symptoms certainly doesn't mean that you have cancer, but they're all indicators of cancer. And I think a big problem I had was exactly what I was just describing when I saw that doctor in July 2021, when he sent me away saying it's probably just constipation. He knew that pancreas cancer was one possibility of what this could be. But what he did was he assessed the likelihood and the risk based on general statistics, coupled that by making an assessment of whether I was mentally fragile or not, and ended up telling me it was probably just fine to take laxatives. What he didn't do was make sure it wasn't the other thing. And this is
the one way, I suppose, John, that the only way that they could feasibly have done that, or certainly the most important step, would have been to give you the scan.
Yes, send me for a scan. Absolutely. Not because you think I have it, but to remove the question that I might. But it seems that the resources just aren't there to allow precautionary scans in the way that would detect so many of these cancers which are being missed. This is the whole issue, is the trouble that you have to actually get sent for a scan. That's the whole problem, and just so many these pancreas cancers especially are being found late because the effort isn't being made to find them early. It's like the outcomes for breast cancer used to be so bad, and then we had a national drive for it, and made women go and get tested, made them get screened. All those breast cancer screenings, they're all precautionary tests. But then we've got a cancer like pancreas cancer, which is a disaster, and pancreas charities are certainly calling for much better screening for pancreas cancer, but until we get serious about it, this is going to continue to be, thousands of people every year dying deaths that didn't have to happen.
I understand, John, that we don't fully understand exactly what causes pancreatic cancer. We just know certain risk factors that.
Yes, generally the same for most cancers. We can't be entirely definitive because there's many things that could trigger it off. Anyway, let me try and move this story along. So I'm coming to the summer of 2022. At this point, I'm really quite sure that pancreas cancer is a possibility because I've been researching my symptoms, and my symptoms lead me back to websites. But I'm not talking about some off the dark web thing about pancreas cancer. I'm talking about NHS websites about pancreas cancer. And I can see that some of my symptoms match, But what I'm also getting from these official web pages is it's very rare. It's very unlikely to be that. It's really chances that it's that is really not very high.
So what do you think? What sort of response? No, I've seen exactly that kind of thing. And what sort of response do you think that promotes in the average person who's reading something worded that way?
Well, it gave me a false sense of security, because it made me evaluate the potential risk that it might be that, rather than very serious. That's probably not that, So although I'd come across it, I'd recognise that my symptoms matched it, I didn't. And partly it's a problem because of how I have to keep a grip on myself and the mental health condition, you see.
Yeah.
So.
Because you're being told not to. On one hand, John, you're being told not to catastrophize. That you maybe have got into that mindset. Here you are in a situation where you are in danger, and perhaps that instinct to catastrophize, to go to the worst possible scenario,
would have
actually helped.
Yeah, really would
You've
have been
mentioned the
helpful.
symptoms a few times now, John. Should we just talk about those just a little, if people are curious?
Let me do a little bit more here. Oh, yeah. Let me do a little bit more first, just to get to where I get sent to the doctor. So I go to this local surgery 4 times from June 2022 to October 2022. And the last time I go is absolutely the worst.
In what sense?
Well, just the behaviour of the doctor was the worst.
Oh.
But before I saw that doctor, I saw one before that who tried to prescribe me antidepressants 5 times in the same meeting.
In one consultation?
Yeah. Tried to offer me antidepressants 5 times in one consultation, and I'd gone, for stomach pain.
So you're going in with physical pain.
I'm going with stomach pain, and I'm going with sleep problems. And they offer me antibiotics, and they don't just offer me once. I have to say no to antibiotics 5 times. That was bad, but the 4th one was the worst, because the doctor I saw then was so absolutely complacent. I can't describe him because I'd be giving too much of her identity away. But this doctor was absolutely complacent and was so laid back about everything that I was saying, including my concern that it was pancreatic cancer. But that doctor ended up finishing the consultation telling me that 10 stone 3 was not that underweight for a 6'3" man. When at the same time I'm telling her that I've dropped from 15.5 stone at the start of the year. Sorry, I didn't say I gave their gender away. I didn't actually mean to. But when I was telling that doctor that I was 15.5 stone at the start of the year, so I've lost 1/3 of my body weight, and it's not under my control. And I'm trying to eat, and I can't eat. I'm trying to eat a proper meal. I'm bringing a proper meal up. All of this I'm telling them, and it's just bouncing off. So what happened is, because of my mental health, I also, have been working with the job centre since I left university on the job programme, and they don't expect a great deal out of me because of my disability, but I'm still expected to try to get in a situation where I'm doing some voluntary work every week. So there's an organisation which is hired by the Department of Work and Pensions to implement this programme. And so I had a caseworker whose actual job was to help me look for work, basically. When they heard how appallingly the 4th and last consultation with that doctor had been at this local town surgery, they were so disgusted by that they helped me report myself to the Council Safeguarding as a vulnerable adult at risk of medical neglect. That's how far I had to go to get a doctor to listen to what I was saying, even as I was actually approaching, end stage cancer. But I still couldn't get them to listen to me.
So we're talking about somebody who's in another line of work completely, but who's working with you quite closely,
because they're in that sector. Yeah, they have a duty of care to their clients' safeguarding. So, they helped me to make that report. Amazingly, within 2 hours, telephone rings. Mr. White, could you come down to surgery for a full battery of tests first thing in the morning? Suddenly, the most senior doctor there is handling my case. And all the tests are done. And as a result of those tests, I'm sent for a scan. Hallelujah. And then
so at this point we're in was this the summer of 2021?
No, this was later. It was October. I saw that dodgy doctor. Then the report went in, and then all of that was done, and then finally final confirmation was given to me on the 13th of December that I have terminal pancreatic cancer. So that is so important, because if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't have shopped the surgery to the council for safeguarding concerns, I still would not know now. It's only because I did that I was able to get the tests that was able to confirm what the hell has been going on. And of course, it's done no wonders of good for my mental health, because now I know what's real and what's not.
Because you've
And now I
regained
know,
some sense of control.
yeah,
You know that the things that you were
exactly,
experiencing weren't your imagination, and you've
exactly.
got some a level of control back into the
Now I
situation.
know that me puking up my meals isn't psychosomatic. Now I know that I'm not just over catastrophizing the symptoms of constipation. So a lot of the stuff which has been very harmful to my sense of mental harmony and well-being over the last, since the start of 2020 is now resolved. I feel better and stronger mentally than I have in a good long time. As bizarre as that is, but then I am my own person. I'm not everybody. And so, my relationship with death and my attitude to death, and effectively my lack of fear of death, is helping me where other people would be absolutely drowning in this right now. So, swings and roundabouts in life, huh?
It is indeed. Let's take a look at some of the stats. This comes from Pancreatic Cancer UK, and these are some of the coldest and hardest of facts to read through. Pancreatic cancer is the 10th most common cancer. Every day, 28 people are diagnosed with the disease. It says that more than half of people diagnosed within 3 months pass away. It's tough to diagnose. 3 in 5 people are diagnosed at an advanced stage, yourself being one, I know,
yep.
John. It's tough to treat. 1 in 10 people with pancreatic cancer will receive potentially curative surgery, and it's tough to survive with a less than 7% survival rate. Tough to research. Only 3% of the annual UK cancer research budget goes into pancreatic cancer. Despite those figures, wow, okay, nearly half of all patients are diagnosed.
How much work is needed in this area.
It's sobering, John. It really is. It's awful to read.
And you can see how easily this could be you or anybody.
Any of us.
And not just with this cancer, but with others. But when we've been in this position, especially with the lockdowns, that just paralyzed the whole health industry. I mean, to be fair to him, the doctor I saw who gave me a physical exam in June 2020 probably wouldn't have been able to get me a scan even if he wanted to send me for one at that time, with COVID in full swing.
No, and I know that you're not an unreasonable
that's certainly
person.
Been a factor, but until we get much more serious about this is not going to improve. I mean, this has been a shock to me. It's been a shock to my life. You'll remember, Dan, that in the summer, I did that major investigative piece of work. It took me lots of weeks.
Intensive work over a period of the best part of 2 months, wasn't it?
And the follow-up, So I was trying to get my life going again. I want to get my writing going again. I've moved. I'm so much less stressed. I'm living in so much nicer
direct
place.
Your energy and your resources and your time into something productive and that you believed in.
But then you'll remember also that at the start of October, I then had to say, look, I have to stop doing anything active for this, even though I got all this going. Even though I've got all these wheels moving for this campaign, I've got to step back because my weight loss is getting really alarming, and I've got to focus on what the hell's going on with my health right now. You remember me stepping back?
I remember you telling me personally, John, that you thought you could be very ill.
Well, that was a reasonable, rational thought at the time, and it's turned out to be true.
As it turns out.
Those initial tests did show that I had this stomach bacteria, which, getting rid of that removes a lot of my stomach pain in terms of ache across the bottom of my stomach, but not in terms of the acute pain in the stomach area, which of course, that's cancer. At first I had a hope that my stomach problems were really being caused by that bug, and I thought, great, now that's getting out of the way, that's getting cleared up, everything's going to start to improve, my health is going to come back. I'll get nice and strong, and spring 2023, I'll come back out fighting. That was my thoughts. And then December 13th. No, that's not the future after all.
Was anybody with you when you were diagnosed?
No. No, I haven't done that. The thing is, because my long-term girlfriend died, and I felt so unwell, I haven't really got out and made friends in the new place yet. Not like I was.
It started a new life.
Yeah, but you can't throw yourself into something when you feel rotten all the time. So I just wanted to try and get healthy first before I started to meet people. I think I wanted to enjoy it, getting into a
Yeah.
community. So I try to put my health first, and but it has put me in an unfortunate position where I'm alone and dying of cancer. Obviously, I've got family, but none of them are especially close. So it's not like they can just pop in all the time. And delays caused by Christmas and New Year since my diagnosis meant that I've actually had to get all the way through to this point, to this very day, and I've still not had a lick of help at home, despite the fact I'm shuffling around my house like a cripple because of radial pain. However, just before we started this interview, I've had my first visitor. So things have been tough, but they are getting better in terms of getting my home care situation lined up. Because I'm determined to live at home as long as possible. I want to go from here to the hospice. That's all I want. I don't want to be in a care home. I don't want to set foot in the hospital. I just want to. I want to spend it as quiet and calm a time as possible, coping with this as calmly as possible at home until I can't do anymore.
Shall
That's the
we?
plan.
Well, I obviously I hope that it works out for you the way you want it to for yourself and how
Well,
you
I
feel it
mean,
would be capable
I'll carry on as
or
I
ideal.
am for a little bit. And I mean, right now, what I can eat is reduced drastically. I'm now on the shakes,
Yeah.
protein replacement shakes. But I'm not. I'm force feeding myself the shakes if I have to, but I'm not managing much more than that. The idea, even of a sort of side plate meal, has pretty much gone out of the question. It's just getting too difficult. My disease is becoming advanced, and I just can't hide. It can't be hidden from me anymore because every day now is the reality of coping with the pain. Frankly,
Please share this video out there. Anybody, if this story is striking a note with you on any level, whether you're worried about your own health or the health of a loved one, or whether it's the human interest angle of it, however, whatever is piquing your interest, if this is affecting you in any way, please share this along and help us inform other people of John's story and about pancreatic cancer generally. Should we look at some of these symptoms, John, and explain to people, just
yeah.
generally speaking, how many of these you experienced and what people could
Uh,
expect or what they could be watching out for?
I
I'd
have
imagine
actually
there's no pattern.
experienced every single one.
So
Clay
it
coloured.
says the early symptoms are clay-coloured stools.
Yes, that's greyish stools. It's stools that look like they've been stewing too long, taking too long to pass through. And that was one of the things I started to notice was weird discoloured stools. And oh yeah, I mean it's a great hobby. I mean I've been looking at my poo every time I go for the last 2.5 years. Oh, it's a bit yellow today.
Man's got to have a
And
hobby, John.
yeah, and diabetes, of course, because it's to do with impairment of pancreatic function. And I mean, I'm treating myself as if I have diabetes because de facto I do, even though it's not actually diabetes, it's pancreas diabetes, if you know what I mean. But I'm on absolutely eliminated sugar, and even so, my blood sugar is dangerously high. So cake and sweets and alcohol and everything, anything that can produce sugar is gone, because if I don't, I'm going to have a diabetic crisis. My blood sugar is going to go critical. I'm going to get stuck in hospital. So, reducing the diabetic risk is very real. Abdominal pain. Oh,
Yeah, you said that's
what I
the back.
don't know about abdominal pain after all the abdominal pain I've experienced. I mean,
You said it was the
it's
back
like
pain that kept you up at night, but abdominal pain, was that more during the day or was that at night as well?
all the bloody time, But when it was bad, it was bad. Like I just got to stay in bed with this bloody pain all day, And that was from pretty early. That was from early weeks, Then indigestion, because you're not digesting your food so well.
You explained the function of the
Yeah,
pancreas
if you're
very
not,
well. So yeah,
if those enzymes aren't there, your food's not going digested so well. It's going to pass slower. It's going to pass more painfully, or as per a couple of points later, it comes back up. Weight loss.
yeah. Now you, by
When
the
the
sounds of
weight
it,
loss
you're a
started, I
big
really knew
unit. If you're going from 15 stone down to 10, that's, as you said, it's a
15
third
and
of
a
your.
half down to 10. Yeah. I am just my bones, Dan. It's a shame, but there we are. Nausea and vomiting. Yes. Feeling weak. Absolutely. I've had times when my legs have been going from under me, just having this wave of weakness come over me. And non-cardiac chest pain. Hell yes.
What does that? How would you describe that? Because
It means pain in the heart area not being caused by the heart.
I see.
Because that's pain radiating up the nerves, I assume.
Would you describe it as a shooting pain or more sort of
No.
more dull?
It's a proper dull ache pain.
Yeah.
Whereas your pain in your shoulder, that's a good old right in there. Pain, that one. But again, that's radiating along the nerves from the cancer side, causing pain in those areas. And loss of appetite because your stomach function is screwed. So you're going to, because you're going to feel that you're going to learn, but you can't manage food the same as you could, and then you're going to be adverse to having larger portions, and then you're going to be adverse to eating at all. So I mean that's all of those. I've had all of them, but any one of them is enough reason to have a concern. And if you've got 2 or 3 of them, and your doctor doesn't share that concern, you need to take drastic action and not let yourself get lulled into complacency. You see, the thing is, I'm not against doctors. I don't think doctors are trying to murder us. I don't think doctors are bad people, but while I have the greatest respect for their knowledge, their dedication, etc., when you really consider the environment of an NHS surgery in which they're working, can you really trust doctors to necessarily have enough time to think enough about what's in front of them? Because I don't feel that most of the doctors I met didn't think enough about what was being said. They sort of took a couple of points and then thought, there you are, that's it. There you are, Mr. Off you go. And next appointment, please.
They're human beings at the end of the day, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, they've got pressures. Of course, they've got pressures. I'm not the only person suffering in the UK, so I mean that is very true. But that's the issue. When you've got to be prepared to stand for your guns. And I would say something I didn't do because of my income, but I really wish perhaps that I had. If you're not happy with what your NHS top doctor is telling you, pay to get a private consultation. Because for £300 in a private consultation, you can actually get facts that the NHS won't even bother to try to find. And then you can guide the NHS treatment. And a friend of mine is in a similar position in which he's coping with disability and he's coping with problem doctors taking him seriously. So he does that. If he doesn't feel that they're taking him seriously enough, he goes and pays for a private doctor to give him not just a 5-minute chit chat, but a workover, a top to bottom workover, and use that data to then set the NHS up. The thing is, Dan, right? I'm trying to be nice, right? I really am. Okay.
I know.
But yesterday, the 3rd of January, I had a very important appointment to meet my official cancer oncologist at Hereford Hospital. This is the person who will be deciding what, if any, my course of treatment will be. And just before Christmas on the 23rd, I was lucky enough to get cancellation at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. And I had endoscopy and biopsy done. And as it happened, yesterday morning, my brother was going to take me, but he's not. He's not a very well man. I mean, his sciatica flared up, so he was paralysed in bed yesterday morning. All of a sudden, I didn't have a driver. I don't even want to get in a car. My stomach is so uncomfortable. Anything which is going to jostle it, I was like, boom. So just the idea of being in a car, I'm now quite sensitive about, let alone dragging myself along hospital corridors. So when I heard my brother wasn't going to be able to make it, sod this. I'm not taking a taxi and I'm certainly not driving. Can't make this appointment. Can we do it on the dog and bone? Yeah, great, they could. I get that call in the afternoon, and it's so good that we didn't make all that bloody effort, because if I had dragged myself to Hereford to the hospital yesterday and my brother put himself out as well, what we would have been told was, oh, we don't know anything because we haven't got my results from an investigation done on 23rd of December. And the 3rd of January, they have no information. How is that possible in 2023, Dan?
The information age, I don't know.
You're gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked. We're all gobsmacked.
I can't say anything. I can't.
Not only that, but they would have made me drag myself through all of that, which, believe you me, would have hurt and been difficult and would have strained me and left me feeling pain and having to recover from going at the moment. My condition is getting so bad that taking a trip like that is now something I have to recover from. Only to be told, oh yeah, no, at no point you turn up, mate. Something's very wrong, isn't it, Dan? The lack of the ability to see the individual as anything else than just a unit to be shoved along a machine, shoved along the conveyor belt. And all the time, I'm somebody who's been diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer, given 3 to 6 months to live. Yet, if I had my endoscopy when it was originally looking like it was going to be in the middle of January, so I saved myself 3 weeks getting endoscopy just before Christmas because of this lucky cancellation. But even that hasn't helped them get the information in time to actually have a plan for my treatment in January. And if I'd had it on time, would they have no treatment until February? So that's, at least 1.5 months of no treatment. Even if treatment could do something, which is debatable, there's a question over that still, but even then, they're still wasting all that time where you should be it should be, okay, you've got this, you need this, you go for this. Certain things like lab tests, they're going to take a certain amount of time. That's true. But how can you not have the results from a scan, well over 2 weeks later?
The question I suspect a lot of people who are watching, listening to our conversation may be asking at this point, John, is how is pancreatic cancer treated? We saw the statistics a moment ago, and they are somber, to say the least. But you have been offered treatment.
It's a bugger, right? The pancreatic cancer is a bugger because of where the pancreas is. So cancer in the pancreas can spread to your stomach and your liver very, very easily, and also your blood vessels. And that's exactly what mine's done.
So we're talking of a choice between curative treatment or palliative treatment.
Unless you can catch the cancer before it leaves the pancreas, your outcome just drops off a cliff.
I understand. Yeah.
Because once it's gone somewhere else, and it's so difficult, so you really need to catch it early. But if you're not thinking about it as a possibility, if you're dismissing it as a possibility, if the NHS websites tell you that it's not very likely to be that, it doesn't strike me as very surprising that so much of it is being missed because there's no focus on it. Whereas it seems to me, if you get an adult who suddenly presents with high blood sugar, for example, they should be screened for pancreas cancer to make sure that it's not that and not diabetes. Because if they did that at that point in time, how many people would they save?
We have the technology to scan people at various junctions.
Yeah, but we've got to. Why is so much money just being spent on the NHS and we're just getting all these bad outcomes? Certainly, other countries' outcomes on pancreas cancer are better, but it's all about that. But it's all about this time. The time.
Because we could talk from now until whenever, couldn't we, about the things that we all know, the words that we're all familiar with, the words that kind of set us all on edge, words like chemotherapy, words like radiation therapy.
Yeah.
It's unbearable to even think
about. Let's talk about this. I am in fact lucky about something, because if I wasn't lucky, I'd already be dead. You see, they think that I have a rarer form of pancreas cancer, which is called an endocrine cancer. And why that matters is that pancreas cancer that develops in the pancreas is so lethal, but an endocrine cancer is more like cancer in the pancreas rather than cancer of the pancreas. So it's slower. And only 5% of pancreas cancers are endocrine cancers. So 95% of people get the standard version, which it really is like you're lucky if you make 2 weeks, if you get 3 months.
Yeah.
A lot of people have got stories like that. I just got diagnosed and he died almost straight away. As that happens a lot because by the time it's found, it's way too bloody late. When you're not thinking about it to eliminate it early. Because it's not an easy organ to really find that there's something wrong with, because it's surrounded by everything else. Where is that pain exactly coming from? So I mean, there's all sorts of problems with catching pancreas cancer.
And I suppose because it's accepted that if something doesn't start to show any symptoms until quite late in the day, then offering something such as scans even later in the equation would seem to be putting the horse in the cart.
The only thing having a scan has really done for me is established the actual truth. But if I hadn't have pushed the doctors into basically forcing them to give me a scan so they didn't look like they were negligent, by forcing them to do that, I managed to find this information out in time to do something useful with it. Yes, things like this, but far more importantly, to have the important conversations with family members and friends while I still could. Because otherwise, what would have happened is that I would have suddenly been taken very ill. I would have gone to hospital. I would probably have been out of it if I wasn't in a coma. I would have died shortly afterwards. They'd have sliced me open and go, "Oh, look at that, a giant cancer. Who could have known?" That would otherwise have been my fate if I hadn't have pushed them to find this out now.
And again, we all know of people, have spoken to people or relatives or friends who can tell stories like that. You mentioned earlier on about breast cancer.
I'm very pleased what I did for that reason, because it's allowed me to actually get a running jump at facing up to making a good end, and otherwise I wouldn't have that. So that is so valuable to me. But I'm sorry, I wind it back. So I've explained that I've got this rare version. Now, because it's slower, I'm still alive. Well, I wouldn't have been if it was the other version. So again, that's a bit lucky, gives me this extra bit of time. But B, it's potentially treatable. Not curable, but treatable, in that they could knock it back and slow it down more. But it all depends on which type of endocrine cancer it is. Endocrine cancers are 5% of pancreas cancers. And then of the endocrine cancers, depending on replication rate, is how aggressive it is. The faster it replicates, the faster it will kill you. So there's 3 types. There's slow, medium, fast. Now, if and only if my endocrine cancer is the slow type, then they are dangling chemotherapy in front of me with the promise that it might get me up to a year. But they don't have the data, so they can't tell me that yet because they don't have the information from the biopsies. So it's still guesswork. Is it type 1, 2, or 3? If it's type 2 or 3, they can't do nothing anyway, because even chemotherapy won't be quick enough to make a difference.
And that's why the
And
chemotherapy
yeah,
doesn't appeal
yeah.
to you generally, does it? You've spoken to me about this privately.
Well, look, I haven't heard the full proposal yet, and I do appreciate that these people want to try to do something for me. On the other hand, I'm thinking very much quality over quantity. And if somebody says, hey, you can live another year than you otherwise would, but your every day is basically lying as still as possible, trying not to hurt as much as possible, it's not exactly a fun use of time.
Not for someone such as yourself.
And I've
Someone
been through such a crappy time, to be honest, since I had that stroke in 2016. My life has been very difficult the last 6 years. I'm not really inclined to just give myself a lot of shit at the end of it, just to polish the whole thing off. So it's going to have to be very persuasive. But the point is, because of that little detail and the fact that I don't have that information because the test results aren't through, I don't know whether there's even going to be an offer of chemotherapy. And it seems to me there's only about a 3 in 10 chance there will be. So there's a 7 in 10 chance that they won't be offering anything, and they're basically useless, even if I wanted
Another
what they're offering.
question. Another question people out there may be asking, John, is could it be removed? Can people live without their pancreas?
Well, you can have the pancreas removed. You can live without it, but you'd have to be in a care setting, I think, to have a chance. Because if you haven't got enzymes, you can imagine how much you need constant monitoring without a pancreas.
So you'd be taking insulin
Yeah,
pretty much
and you
constantly.
can get a pancreas transplant. But these options only exist if it's found early. Even in alternative treatments, nobody wants to touch late-stage pancreas cancer, but it just doesn't give time for anything much to work. Whether it's CBD or detox or the other things that people do to try to help themselves when they have cancer. Pancreas cancer is the worst because it just doesn't give you time for anything. Radiotherapy is highly targeted, so it's only used for specific clusters, as I understand it. Chemotherapy is a more of a background blast, and other stuff like immunotherapy, certainly very promising and has a lot to offer, but it takes a long time. So there's little chance that immunotherapy would be useful in my case. Whereas if I had something different, and I had a cancer that was potentially survivable, and then I had a heavy blast of chemo to knock it out, and then you start on immunotherapy to build you up so that you don't get to try and build up your immune system if the cancer doesn't come back. That's the function of immunotherapy. So it's not that applicable when everything's already at the it's a bit buggered stage. And they can't do surgery on my
Such
cancer.
a way with words, how John?
I'm a country lad. Yeah, I can't do anything with my cancer in terms of surgery because it's already into my blood vessels, and if they try it, kill me.
Earlier on, you spoke about the fact that you've just been introduced to your oncology expert. For
Yes, first
there,
consultation yesterday.
Anybody who's watching this who may be concerned or just wants a little bit more information, I understand you've got a couple of charities.
Yes, let's look at them. Absolutely.
So first of all, let's look at. I mentioned them earlier on. Pancreatic Cancer UK. They have a website, don't they, and a helpline?
Yes, and I've rung the nurse, and she was ever so helpful, and she told me things about my medication that the NHS didn't tell me. For example, I'm taking this medication called Creon, which is a substance called pancreatin, and basically you take these tablets at the same time that you eat. So you get artificial enzymes hit your stomach at the same time, and they actually allow your food to digest. So eating since I've been on this pancreatin, which is only since the 13th of December, oh my God, it's been so much better.
You haven't been
Because
able
my
to
food's
manage necessarily.
digesting now, and you don't get that horrible.
So it's not the question of you're able to manage more; it's just a lot less discomfort.
That is an immediately helpful drug. But the nurse at Pancreatic Cancer UK, when I spoke to the helpline, was able to tell me, don't take your pancreatin with a cup of tea, because hot drinks nullify it. And nobody else told me that. Which is I
So
love a cup of tea, Dan.
if people reach out to Pancreatic Cancer UK through this site, or they can either do it digitally through a text form, can't they? Or they can ring through.
I thoroughly recommend these charities. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the first one.
And the second is a little bit more specialised. Because remember, endocrine cancers are only 5% of pancreas cancers, and this one is specifically for the neuroendocrine pancreas cancers. And both of these charities will be benefiting from my estate.
So again, they've got a website here. As you say, that it's unlikely, I suppose. What was the percentage rate? 5% of pancreatic
Only 5%
cancer?
of pancreas cancers are neuroendocrine cancers.
But even so, it depends on the kind of person you are, doesn't it? How much information you want at any given time. Some people like to drip it through. Some people like to read absolutely everything there is about something. And then...
Well, getting the letter. Actually, do you want to put that up? Let's show people the letter. So you can see what it looks like to actually receive a document of doom. Here we are. So obviously I have redacted this slightly, but as you can see, diagnosis metastatic pancreatic cancers. What we're going to do? Send me for pickies in the biopsy. Creon, I was just mentioning, talking about putting me on pancreatin there. Codamol for the pain. I had to up those. 8 milligram was useless. Ensure 4 to 6. That's nutrition shakes, which I now have. I've got a different brand, but same thing. And also to do all this other testing, gut hormone profile, metadrenalins, and all of that stuff. So I saw this 50-year-old gentleman in gastroenterology today. He's almost 2-year history of anorexia and abdominal discomfort. He got that wrong, 2.5, which has got worse over the last year or so. He has lost almost 5 stone in weight, not able to eat much, it causes discomfort. Sometimes he vomited food, sometimes pain radiates to the back as well. He went on to have abdomen and pelvis, which has shown a pancreatic mass in the head of the pancreas with liver metastases. To translate that, there's a fat cancer at the top, filling up the pancreas, and it's spread to my liver. That's what that means. As we discussed in our meeting that morning, the plan was to refer him for scans and to consider palliative chemotherapy, which the only reason that's possible is because it mentions here the possibility it's neuroendocrine. So, if it wasn't neuroendocrine, they wouldn't even be offering me any form of chemo for this. It's only that chance which is keeping that possibility alive. And I'm mostly ignoring it. I explained all this to Mr. White. He understands no curative treatment will be possible, only be palliative. Wants to get on with it, confirmed to Birmingham. But there you are. That is the letter. That is
describe it as a letter of doom.
With a document of doom, but that's what you get.
And how, if you don't mind my asking, John, how was this? Because to take this right back to the top of our conversation, how has this affected your mental health? You mentioned earlier on you've regained a sense of control.
Well, actually, my mental health is better than it's been in years.
Even with all this information, it's not overloading at all.
Because it's providing absolute certainty, and now I know that it wasn't in my head. That's a massive relief. I can't help but be relieved by that. I mean, of course, then I've got to deal with the reality of everything that this entails. But I have 2 advantages there. One is that I have undertaken rigorous spiritual journeys in my life, so the idea of death is not scary to me. The second is that I have a lot of experience in this area. I've helped people dying of this kind of death, so it doesn't scare me for that reason either. So I've got great advantages of not being scared. And another part of the way I've rationalised this is, okay, I'm finding out late, But it also means all that suffering I was doing 2020, 2021, most of 2022, I was doing my dying without knowing it. I've been dying for ages. This has only been heading one way for ages. And, at least I'm getting to make a good end of it, but it's not going to be dragged out. And it's also got to be said, that just because you find a cancer early doesn't mean that you're going to get cured of that cancer. It just means that you've got a chance, especially with pancreatic cancer, whereas if it's found late, you've got no chance whatsoever. But I could have found this early. I could have jumped through every hoop. I could have taken every option they might have given me, and I still might be dying of it. And I mean, that happened to a friend of mine. He had leukemia, and it was found early, and he went through 3 hellish doses of chemotherapy, and it still killed him. So nothing is certain in life. It's a question of what's fair, isn't it? And giving people a fair shot, a fair chance, And I think if I had been able to demand a scan and get one, I would certainly have been demanding one in the summer of 2021. If not before.
I understand that you've tried through social media. You've tried to get a hashtag going of a right to scan.
Well, I have, but I mean, I have to recognise I'm not in a position to run a hashtag campaign anymore.
No.
So I'm just creating the idea and floating the idea, and I can't create content like I could. I mean, I'm not likely to be producing any more major articles, Dan. That's it's just how it is. Because that kind of work
such as a hashtag, though, once it exists and other people can pick it up.
Yeah.
And we, in the age that we live in now, there seems to be, and I think we all joke sometimes, it can be a little overwhelming. There's a day for everything and a ribbon for everything. But at least there's Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month in November, which is obviously a long way off.
But a good month, a very good month. November 2023 especially is going to be a very good month. But we're not going into that Doctor Who stuff.
So, but did you, as you understand it, with the charities that you've mentioned, the fact that there's an awareness month for pancreatic cancer, people are busy living their lives, aren't they?
The problem. Always the problem. Yes, it is. But I mean, obviously, most people don't know me, so I'm just another random story to most people. But I do at least hope that the people who have known me over the internet over the last few years, who are now hearing me tell my story, I hope it helps them to think it through, because I just don't want anyone to be me. Who wants to be me? It sucks to have to deal with that later on. But I have got ahead of it. I've been very upfront. I've told everybody straight away, and I'm very glad that I did, because it got me these important conversations over the winter holiday, which just wouldn't have happened otherwise, and it's put me in a much better position. So that I've got my funeral organised. I picked out the grave. I'm going to be buried on an eco garden of woodland of remembrance. I'm going to be buried in the garden of remembrance. I'm going to have a silver birch tree planted on top of me.
That's very you.
So in a few years' time, I will be Grandad's tree, which I think is a lot better than Grandad's old stone. In terms of remembering people, I'm something living. Very
it's somewhere that people can go to, and they can look at something that is growing and thriving, is part of something.
So you see, I did that on purpose, because again, my experience with people dying, I had people who were very clear to me that they were about to enter that moment of crisis where something would go spoiling and their life would never be the same. It happens to everybody in the dying process. There's that time you don't drive your car again. There's that time that you can't make it to the loo without help again. There's that time that you leave your house for the last time. These are like key points where things get taken away from us bit by bit by bit. I mean, I tell you what I'm missing this week, especially, is because my cancer is now radiating front and back through my pancreas, so I'm getting inescapable pain both sides. Both like that front and back coming from the left hand side of my lower chest. Can't escape it. have to have strong medication to live with it. And, even though I'm on medication, doesn't mean I'm in no pain. But you have to understand that that's normal. When you're talking about pain relief, you need the pain first before you take the pill to relieve it, unless you're going to start taking pharmaceuticals as a sort of background, which I don't want to do yet. I only want to take them when I need them to. Try and take them as little as I need to. I'm probably drifting a little bit. What I'm trying to say is, because I've got that stuff sorted, because I've faced up to it now, I can relax. And where I'm at now is I don't really care.
And you can be there for your friends and your family and help them through this.
Yeah, and a big part of what I'm doing is I know what people are like, and they go, I wish I'd said that to him while I still could. But I'm making sure you get the chance, especially to my family, because the more if they and this is me on Christmas Day. You can see I've matured into my writing persona far more than my somewhat severe care worker look. But believe you me, when you're working with advanced dementia patients, you don't want long hair. It's not a good idea.
You've got a bit Gandalf, haven't you?
Well, just a bit, or even dare I say, a little bit the Lion Aslan. Because I'm a particular fan of Aslan.
I'd got that. So this was you on Christmas.
Might have noticed slight lion obsession in the imagery I tend to use in regard to myself. Well, let's try and draw a line here, Dan. I think I've said everything I feel I need to say. What would you say as my interviewer? How would you wrap this up? What have you experienced listening to my story?
Well, the things that I know about, I'm no different to anybody else, to any male, to any human. These are the things that one tries to push to the back of one's mind, and more often than not, they're the things that we don't think about because we're busy getting on with life, and we don't like to look into the corners. And we hear about people either close to us, they could be our family, our friends, and it goes out in waves, doesn't it? How close they are to us.
Yes,
we hear the stories, we hear the tragic tales, we hear that they caught it too late. We hear this stuff, and obviously we feel it more the closer a person is to us. And yet sometimes the more you hear about a story, the more you take a time to listen to a person, the more affected we are, because it strikes that chord with us all as human beings. This is regardless of any other characteristics that we may have, anything else that forms part of our identity. We've all got a pancreas. It could be any of us.
Oh yeah, we certainly do.
This is what I'm finding the most sobering of all. It's making me look at myself, look at the way that I think about my own health, the way that I respond to hearing stories such as yours. And I'm now imagining not just how you feel, but imagining how your family feel.
I wish I'd been a bit more motivated. I wish I'd been a bit more afraid. I wish I'd been a bit more militant. But I have to let that go because my wishes won't change anything. And another thing that I've learned about dying, you see, Dan, is that don't die full of regret, anger, or self-pity, because it only makes you miserable and you won't enjoy it. Maybe that's a silly way of putting it, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is that you just don't want these poisons. You want to liberate yourself of them. The process of dying, if you get the most out of it, the purpose is to make as good a death as possible. So if your last day is full of feelings of love and closeness and happiness and, here's a strange word we don't hear in society very much, Dan, appreciation. Appreciate what you've had. Don't get resentful and messed up and bitter over what you can't have, because none of us can have everything, and nothing is forever, and no one gets to choose the hour. And at least I'm having the luxury of being able to prepare a dignified death, whereas I could have a chimney could fall off a building, smack on my head, or I could cross the road, go smack into a car, you know. But this is how a lot of people do die. And I'm more afraid of a sudden death I'm not ready for than a death that I'm accepting I'm ready. You know, we all react differently to things, don't we? But maybe some people would like to go out like a blink without even knowing it. You know,
John.
But
it's been a privilege to speak to you at any time, but particularly about something that is this personal. That is this.
We don't talk about death and dying nearly enough. We really don't. If we did, I think we'd have a healthier relationship with our lives.
Let's remind people those two charities that you were talking about.
Yes, pancreaticcancer.co.uk for all pancreatic cancer, and neuroendocrincancer.uk for all neuroendocrine cancers, which includes, of course, pancreatic endocrine cancers. You know, and I haven't just picked them out the top of a phone book. I've researched those charities, and I'm happy that they're making the kind of waves that need to be made. And that's why I've chosen to support them. It's not just the names, it's because I'm approving of what they're doing. They've passed the test. So I recommend them. You know,
as we said earlier on, this is the 21st century, and YouTube is the world's largest streaming platform. Please share this video. You don't necessarily have to say anything or lead it in with any more information. Just share it along to whoever you think may find it informative, interesting, enlightening even, I don't know, or people who may appreciate the story and the sentiment and the pragmatism that is John White. You can, for the moment, you are still, you do still use social media for the time being, don't you? And your
as long as
hashtag
I
right
feel
to
able
scam.
to. Yeah, I mean, I'm making some point on right to scam. More importantly, at
People
John
may
the
feel-
White One, pinned post.
People may feel compelled
to
to
do that.
connect with you, John, after hearing
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
Although your time is
They're welcome
precious.
to. They're absolutely welcome to. You know, I will respond as long as I can. I have a few more. I have a few more things booked to do. But I will say this: I'm not booking my diary too far ahead. Not because I think I'm imminently about to die, but simply because I can't manage this too long. Even this level of talking and conversation, you know, I'm done really quite well actually to do an hour and a half of chatting, because I took my pain meds just before we started, so I think we've done quite well with an hour 30, and I'm really happy to have had the chance to tell this story. And I think my final words here is to you, dear listener, especially you're listening to this, you know, in a few months' time when I am no longer here. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you every success in making the most out of every single one of your days. And watch your back, and don't be complacent, and don't let it happen to you. And God bless, and go safe.
John, thank you for asking. Thank you for asking me to help you tell your story. I do consider this a great privilege.
And thank you for being willing to, you know, be my interviewer for what is a difficult conversation, you know. So I really appreciate that very much.
Please share this video, and obviously take care of yourselves. All the information will be in the description of the video and any show notes where you may find it. I don't see how I can follow that, but I do appreciate your time, John. I'll give you the final word.
Well, you know, words, you know, it's funny, you know, I was thinking as a writer, because you always think that words can solve all your problems, but death is a problem that no amount of clever words can change or solve or fix or alter in any way whatsoever. The only thing they can do is help us come to terms with it. And you know, I think of myself as someone who's done so much campaigning over the years, you know, being a general, you know, but every leader, every commander, every general always ends up fighting the ultimate enemy that they cannot beat. And that's what death is, you know. But then, as much as death is also the enemy, death is also the friend. Because when your body is absolutely knackered and becomes a cage of pain, there's no doubt that, you know, there's nothing wrong with dying. There's nothing to be afraid of with it. It is about release from suffering. Whether you believe it's oblivion that follows or golden paradise, it doesn't matter. There comes a point where human life, the suffering becomes too much for us to continue, and of course with terminal illness we haven't got a choice because we're not going to be able to continue. So why fight against what you can't accept, what you can't change? Bit of wisdom, bit of grace. I'm doing my best to hopefully show a good way, and I'm just filled with love. As I'm getting ready to leave the world, I'm just filled with love for it. As hard-minded and pragmatist as I am, I'm also a very emotional man, and I'm in a good place all told, and this has also been a big help because now I know my story's been told. So thank you again, Dan, and thank you all for listening.
John White there, speaking in January 2023, and that was his testimony. John passed away on Wednesday, the 24th of July 2024. He died at home and wasn't alone. His close friend of many years, Tim, was there with him. He's mourned by his son, granddaughter, and family. Everyone at Type 40 offers them our deep condolences. Once again, there are links to the charities related to pancreatic cancer in the description below, where you'll find further reading and contact details. And feel free to contact Type 40 through our social medias if you wish, in total confidence. On behalf of John White, John the White, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.